I've been smoking cigarettes every day for years. Before you judge me, let me just say that I recently started seeing a therapist for my nicotine addiction. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped much. The only thing worse than my nicotine addiction is my sleep schedule. I don't know what it is. I find myself staying up hours past midnight and rarely get out of bed before noon. While I'm trying to fix these parts of my life, they're extremely relevant to what I'm about to tell you. It began a few months ago. I was standing on my balcony, like I do most nights, smoking a cigarette. I live in a really secluded neighborhood. It's not like the houses around here are right next to each other. Despite this, I have a neighbor whose fence I can see over if I'm standing on my balcony. I'm not nosy or anything, but this particular night, I was looking into his yard. I had never met the guy, but I assumed he lived alone since there was only ever a navy blue BMW parked in his driveway. But not this night, though. There was a black van I'd never seen before sitting in front of his house. I didn't make anything of it, just noting the coincidence to myself. The next night, though, I made it a point to pay attention to his yard, and the same black van was parked there again. I didn't assume something sinister was going on. I was more intrigued than anything. The following morning, I went up to my balcony and looked into his yard. The van was gone. For the remainder of the week, I made a game out of observing the van at night, theorizing its purpose. I said I wasn't nosy, but I sure am obsessive. It's actually the main reason most of my friends drifted out of my life. I wasn't going to do more than observe, though. It wasn't my business or place to poke around further. That is, until one night, when I saw something that completely changed my perspective of the situation. I was up later than usual. It was maybe 5 in the morning. The van was there, as it had been the past several nights. I was smoking my last cigarette when my neighbor actually walked outside, something I hadn't seen yet. I watched as he made his way to the van, carrying what appeared to be a long black bag. It almost looked like a set of golf clubs, only much heavier. After opening the van's sliding door, he delicately placed the bag inside. He promptly got in the driver's seat and sped off. I was dumbfounded. I had absolutely no idea what he could have been carrying. I was exhausted though, so I figured I'd think about it more the next morning. The next day, I decided that I'd go out on my balcony a little earlier and wait for the van to arrive at his house. I brought my laptop up there so I could get some work done and wait. It was around 10 p.m. and the van wasn't in the driveway, but around 1 a.m. the van pulled in. I quickly shut my laptop and watched. Nothing happened for a good several minutes, like the van just sat there, engine running and all. After about 5 minutes, the driver door opened and there he was. I watched as he went around to the side of the van, then slid the door open and pulled out the same bag that he had put in the night before. He seemed to be struggling this time around, visibly trying not to crack under the weight of whatever was in there. After waddling a few slow steps, both he and the bag disappeared into his house. I didn't know what to think. I thought about waiting there until 5 a.m. again, but that would be far too taxing on my brain. Something was definitely wrong though, and I was determined to find out what. The next morning, I flipped a coin and ultimately decided to follow his van when he pulled out that night. After a pretty unproductive day, I went up to my balcony around 4 a.m. and waited, cigarette in hand. As soon as I saw movement in his driveway, I rushed downstairs, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. I turned my headlights off and waited for the van to turn onto the main road. Once it did, I began tailing it. After 20 minutes of driving, he pulled onto a dirt path that looked like it led into the woods. It did. I followed, and the woods actually started thinning up a bit. It seemed like this path had once been a main road or something. We drove for another few minutes before I realized what his destination was. There was a deserted gas station literally tucked away in some clearing in the woods, and right in front of it was the BMW I'd always seen parked in his driveway. I feared I was getting too close, so I turned my car around and parked across the street from the dirt road. I must have waited there an hour. His BMW finally pulled out of the clearing. Nervously, I started driving back up the path, not sure what I'd find. I pulled over on the side of the road and started walking towards the gas station. It was eerie. The front door was locked. I walked around to the side. That was locked as well. So was the back door. I needed to know what was inside. There was a row of windows that I tried to open, but none of them would budge. Against my better judgment, I picked up a rock and slammed it into one of the windows. It shattered pretty easily, but there must have been a security system in that place because alarm bells started blaring. I sprinted back to my car, the whole time wondering why an abandoned gas station would be rigged with an alarm system. As I sped out of there, I called 911 and gave them a vague description before hanging up. I got back to my house and ran inside, my heart still racing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the whole thing had blown over. Boy, was I wrong. I went up to my balcony to see like 8 police cars in my neighbor's driveway, lights flashing and everything. I watched as an officer escorted my neighbor out of his house in handcuffs. One by one, the police cars drove away and I was left to my imagination. I lit a cigarette and stood there, finally alone with my thoughts. I've asked the police for details on several occasions, but they would never answer my questions. I've even tried driving back up to that gas station, but the whole road had been blocked off. Maybe one day I'll work up the courage to walk through the woods and go looking for answers.